In this video, I aim to provide an informed perspective on Hamas, a designated terrorist organization operating in the Gaza Strip, in order to help Christians and Americans navigate the overwhelming amount of news, misinformation, and propaganda surrounding the group and the conflicts they are involved in. Many people, especially my age or younger, were largely unaware of Hamas until its brutal attack on Israel, October 7th of 2023. The history of this group, its role in Palestine, and the broader Israeli-Palestinian conflict are often misunderstood, leading many to be swayed by emotional appeals and deceptive narratives. I have engaged in discussions with Palestinians and Muslims both in America and in the Middle East, and I know firsthand how difficult it can be to discern the truth and respond wisely. However, as Christians, our ultimate mission is not political but spiritual. We desire for all people, including those in Gaza and the broader Muslim world, to hear the gospel, experience the love of God through Jesus Christ, and find true hope and refuge in Him. The Bible assures us that we can have the certainty of heaven and deliverance of sin in this life through Christ. While we should strive to be well informed about world events, our primary focus remains on sharing the message of salvation, as Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 2:2, "For I determined not to know anything among you save Christ and Him crucified." At the same time, we are called to show love and support to those in need, as in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 verse 14 instructs us to warn them that are unruly, comfort the feeble-minded, support the weak, and be patient toward all men. Let us approach these complex issues with wisdom, truth, and the love of Christ. And let's pray for the innocent souls who have been used as shields. Let's also pray for the many people blinded by false teachings and a false religion of hate. But let's get some context on Hamas. The Muslim Brotherhood was founded in 1928 in Ismailia, Egypt, by Hassan al-Banna as a response of poverty in the Arab and Muslim countries, and a disdain and a rejection of the Western secular influences. They denounced Western values such as secularism and advocated for a return to traditional Islamic principles. The group sought to establish an Islamic government and expanded its influence across Egypt, including into Gaza when Egypt controlled the territory from 1959 to 1967. In 1967, Palestinian cleric Sheikh Ahmed Yassin founded Majama el-Islamiyah, a charitable offshoot of the Brotherhood that gained Israeli approval to provide social services. However, by the 1980s, Majama had begun stockpiling weapons, and Yassin was arrested in 1984. By 1987, Majama controlled 40% of Gaza's mosques. Following the outbreak of the First Intifada in 1987, 6 Brotherhood members met at Yassin's house and decided to engage in armed resistance against Israel. They founded Hamas, a militant offshoot of the Majama, marking the transition from a social services group to an armed faction that would later govern Gaza. Let's talk about their origins and early development from 1987 to 1994. Hamas, the Islamic resistance movement, emerged in 1987 following the killing of several Palestinian fighters during the First Intifada. Coming from the ideologies and the principles of the Muslim Brotherhood, they finally became Hamas. The organization was founded with the goal of resisting Israel's presence in Palestinian territories, gaining support through a mix of armed resistance and social services. And of course, when we talk about the Palestinian territory, we're talking about from the river to the ocean. Hamas's ideological foundations are noted in a charter that explicitly defines its mission. In Article 7, it describes Hamas as one of the links in the chain of the struggle against the Zionist invaders, talking about the Israel state. They quote the Hadith, which is another religious writing taken seriously as the Quran. The day of judgment will not come about until the Muslims fight the Jews, when the Jews will hide behind stones and trees. The stones and trees will say, "O Muslims, O Abdallah, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him." And of course, this was one of the most reliable writers of the Islamic faith, al-Bukhari. In Article 13 of their constitution, it rejects any possibility of the negotiation settlement, stating that jihad is the only answer. There's no negotiation settlement possible. Jihad, fighting against non-Muslim and forcing Islam, is the only answer. In Article 36 of their constitution, it declares Hamas will support any group opposing Israel and its allies, including America, explicitly positioning Western nations as adversaries. While paving its way, the Islamic resistance movement emphasizes time and again to all the sons of our people, to the Arab and Islamic nations, that it does not seek personal fame, material gain, or social prominence. It does not aim to compete against anyone from among our people or take his place. Nothing of that sort at all. It will not act against any of the sons of the Muslims, or of those who are peaceful towards it, from among non-Muslims, be there here or anywhere else. It will only serve as a support for all groupings and organizations operating against the Zionist enemy and its allies. This foundational ideology continues to shape Hamas's actions and policies today. Radicalization and early attacks in 1994 propelled this conflict. Hamas escalated its violent activities in response to significant events. One key turning point was in 1994 with the Cave of the Patriarchs massacre, where Barak Goldstein, a far-right Jewish extremist, killed 29 Muslims worshiping in Hebron. They were praying. In retaliation, Hamas launched a wave of attacks, including in April 6, 1994, a car bomb in Ufala killed 8 people and wounded 44. April 7, 1994, a Palestinian shooter targeted a bus near Ashdod, killing 1 and wounded 4. April 13, 1994, a Hamas suicide bombing on a bus in Hadara killed 6 and injured 28. These attacks marked Hamas's transition from the militant resistant group to a fully operational terrorist organization, using suicide bombs and attacks on civilians as a key strategy. Let's talk about the Palestinians and the struggle for power in the Gaza Strip. The First and Second Intifada. Hamas played a crucial role in both the First Intifada in 1987 to 1993 and the Second Intifada in 2000 to 2005, promoting a false narrative of Palestinian victimhood to fuel resistance against Israel. The Second Intifada saw a surge in suicide bombings, attacks on Israel civilians, and increased international attention to Israeli-Palestinian conflict. In 2004, Israel intensified its effort to dismantle Hamas by targeting its leadership. Ahmad Yassin, Hamas's founder, was assassinated by the IDF in March 2004. Abdel Aziz al-Rantizi, another key leader, was killed shortly after. Despite these eliminations, Hamas continued to grow in influence. Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005. In 2005, Israel made an unilateral decision to withdraw from Gaza, marking the first time it ceded control of Palestinian territory without preconditions. The expectation was that the Palestinian Authority, PA, led by Fatah, would govern Gaza as an intern authority until democratic elections could be established. In 2006, Palestinian elections and Hamas rise to power. Despite U.S. and Israeli efforts to support Fatah, including a $1.9 billion in aid, Hamas won the 2006 parliamentary elections. Hamas's success was due to a combination of forging political legitimacy through armed resistance, providing social services to gain public support, positioning itself as an alternative to the corrupt Fatah leadership. This victory led to immediate consequences, which only made things worse. Israel cut off aid and cooperation with Hamas, recognizing it as a terrorist organization. In 2006, Iran stepped in, providing significant financial and military support to Hamas. In 2007, Hamas had a complete takeover of Gaza. By 2007, Hamas had violently seized full control over Gaza, ousting Fatah and consolidating the power. This led Israel to impose a blockade on Gaza, citing security concerns due to Hamas's ongoing terrorist activities. And of course, knowing its goal, they had to do this. Western misconceptions and propaganda in 2007 to the present. Over the years, Hamas sympathizers have shaped global perspective by portraying Israel as an aggressor and even a terror group itself, using selective footage of bombings to manipulate public opinion. There's so much misinformation campaigns to sway Western audiences, particularly young people unfamiliar with the historical context. Many Western protesters supporting Palestine today did not realize that Hamas openly advocates for the destruction of Israel and the West and our values. Hamas charter explicitly calls for jihad against non-Muslims and envisions a future that only Muslims will survive the end times. One common false narrative is that Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu created and funded Hamas. In reality, Israel provided financial opportunities for Gaza civilians by allowing more Palestinians to work in Israel, providing more visas and opportunities for them to make more money. The tax collected from these workers were inevitably used by Hamas, furthering its power. And so this is where you might see some of these headlines. This led to a paradox. If Israel helps Gaza and its civilians, it is accused of aiding Hamas. If it doesn't, it is blamed for oppression. Ongoing threats and Hamas's global strategy, Hezbollah, and the quest for legitimacy. A Lebanese militant group that is Islamic sought to gain political legitimacy while maintaining a militant wing. Both organizations receive financial military support from Iran. Both of them have a mission to wipe out Israel. Attempts to manipulate Western perceptions, Hamas has mastered the art of propaganda leveraging. They use the Western ignorance about the Israeli and Palestinian conflict. These videos or pictures usually have the wrong titles and the wrong information on them. They also appeal to social justice movements, aligning itself with the global leftist causes to gain sympathy, the same people they usually don't like. But let's think about the role of the younger generations. A critical issue today is that younger Palestinians and Israelis lack historical context. Many young Gazans have been raised under Hamas's rule, with education systems promoting anti-Israel rhetoric and jihadist ideology. They also usually don't even get an education. Many young Israelis, unaware of past Hamas's atrocities and did not live through those atrocities, may underestimate the existential threat Hamas poses. In 2019, Israel allowed more Palestinians to work with its border, significantly boosting their incomes. Netanyahu's administration sent funds to Gaza, not Hamas, in an attempt to promote stability. However, Hamas indirectly benefited from this, reinforcing the idea that any form of aid could be weaponized against Israel. Finally, let's analyze the recent actions of Hamas and the ongoing conflicts in recent weeks. We have witnessed Hamas returning hostages while simultaneously staging elaborate displays of strength and false victory. At a time where you think they would be expressing gratitude and seeking peace, they have used these moments to showcase their weapons and military presence as they re-enter the Gaza Strip. Their actions appear calculated to deceive the public into believing that Hamas had been weakened only to re-emerge and declare triumph. This deceptive strategy highlights their ongoing agenda, one that neither ends with hostage exchanges nor concessions, but rather continues to escalate with conflict. With nothing else to lose, their tactics will only become more desperate and aggressive, more barbaric. Currently, the prisoner exchange deal being brokered is overwhelmingly one-sided. Hamas is securing the release of 2,000 convicted criminals, terrorists, in exchange for just 33 hostages. History has shown that such deals strengthen terrorist organizations. In 2011, over 1,000 terrorists were released for a single IDF soldier, many of whom returned to violence. Among those being considered for release now is an individual serving 35 life sentences for orchestrating deadly attacks against Israel civilians in 2002. These exchanges not only replenish Hamas's manpower, but also embolden their morale, reinforcing why negotiating with terrorists has long been dangerous and counterproductive. But of course, we want to do anything to stop seeing the innocent civilians and children being killed over this. Hamas has also mastered the use of propaganda, particularly through the exploitation of children to manipulate international perception. Children are often filmed after a bombing when they know that their fighters were in there instead of coming out. They hide where civilians are hiding. Many in the West, particularly among the liberal elite, have been drawn into this narrative, unwittingly amplifying Hamas's messaging.
Hospitals, Hamas uses all three as cover for its operations in Gaza, including its main base underneath the largest hospital.
Under Shifa Hospital and other hospitals in Gaza with network of terror tunnels.
The IDF releasing this animated video claiming that the terror group operates its command and control headquarters from several underground complexes beneath Al-Shifa.
Hamas also has an entrance.
Their tactics include staging and filming civilian casualties to present themselves as victims, despite deliberately embedding their fighters among civilians to provoke retaliatory strikes. The proliferation of graphic content serves their broader strategy, waging war not only on the battlefield, but in the realm of public opinion, where they rely on misinformation to shift the global sentiment. If they can get everybody against Israel, that's a win. Misinformation is a critical tool in this conflict.
What is about a tape playing of a baby crying, which was designed to lure Israeli soldiers into a building. Can you tell us about this and what else Israel is facing when they go into Gaza?
Well, thank you, Shari. I think the story of these booby traps is one of the most instructive lessons about the war that's being fought in Gaza. It started in the north. It's obviously into its second phase now.
Hamas and its supporters have spread false claims, including fabricated statements attributed to Israeli leaders, such as the baseless assertion that Prime Minister Netanyahu called for an extermination to all the Palestinians. I heard this from a Palestinian as I was in New York City, and I was talking to some Muslims, and one of them was from Palestine, and he told me this, and I said, pull up the video, and he couldn't do it. These deliberate distortions are designed to fuel hostility and undermine Israel's legitimacy. Meanwhile, social media has become a battleground where Hamas employs sophisticated digital warfare techniques to manipulate narratives, a tactic reminiscent of the misinformation campaign seen in previous conflicts. And of course, you saw the money that they obviously put in cameras and the gear, because we saw that when they were giving the hostages back. It is important to remember that these same groups have openly expressed hostility toward the West. After 9/11 attacks, footage emerged of Palestinians celebrating in the streets. There were many news outlets that were there capturing this footage, an indication of their deep-seated animosity toward the United States.
For victory being displayed in East Jerusalem today among jubilant Palestinians that the United States had been subject to this attack. What are we to make of that, Jennifer? Are we to, Yasser Arafat may issue this condemnation. Look at this. We're seeing people applauding, clapping, smiling, happy to know that thousands of Americans have died in this sneak attack. And there you see a V for victory.
Yet now we see pro-Hamas demonstrators taking place within our own borders, raising critical questions about national security and ideological influence. The term occupied Palestine territory, while Palestine is recognized as a state by some international entities, it does not meet the full legal criteria for statehood under international law. Stateless nations such as the Kurds in Iraq and the Palestinians face challenges ranging from official recognition to political marginalization. Throughout history, nations have gained independence through decolonization, diplomatic negotiations, and in many cases, armed struggle. The United States, India, Mexico, Haiti, and Indonesia all fought wars to secure their sovereignty. However, true statehood requires not only recognition, but also self-sustaining governance, stability, and adherence to international norms, criteria that Hamas, as the governing force, has failed to meet. Many of the people speaking on these matters are so unaware of the other cultures and the other religions and what they believe. Major social media platforms, including Meta, formerly Facebook, have been accused of suppressing pro-Israel content while amplifying pro-Palestinian narratives. The Ukraine-Russian conflict, once a vocal point of global attention, has been largely overshadowed by Hamas's media strategies. I've been to Ukraine, and that was an unprovoked war, and Ukraine should really be getting the support they need. This shift raises concern about the manipulation of public discourse and the broader implications of digital influence in global conflicts. Ultimately, Hamas's recent actions, their exploitation of hostages, and their ongoing use of propaganda reaffirm their unwillingness to seek peace. In conclusion, the existence of Hamas is not merely a governing body. It remains a terrorist organization committed to the destruction of Israel and the West. Despite efforts to establish democracy in Gaza, Hamas has maintained control through armed resistance, corruption, and strategic propaganda. So let me give you some of the key takeaways to this video. Hamas was founded on the principles of jihad and the destruction of Israel, as outlined in the 1988 Charter. Israel's withdrawal from Gaza in 2005 was an opportunity for Palestine to self-govern, but Hamas instead seized control through violence. Number 3, Hamas has manipulated Western media and protesters, spreading misleading narratives to gain sympathy. Number 4, efforts to support Gaza civilians often backfires as Hamas diverts resources to strengthen its power. Number 5, Hamas-Israel conflict is not merely a political issue. It is an ideological and religious struggle that Hamas has no intention of peacefully resolving. And for those who don't believe in God and want nothing to do with religion, you will miss the points here. As long as Hamas exists in its current form, peace will remain unattainable.